In 2003, I first read The Eden Alternative, one of the many books by geriatrician Bill Thomas that has revolutionized the way Americans think about the value and rights of elders. I began to dream of new possibilities for elders here on the vineyard. The first greenhouse nursing home was actually started in 2004 in Mississippi, but it wasn't until 2013 that a group of us were able to establish Healthy Aging Martha's Vineyard, a new planning, advocacy, and community building organization for older adults here on the vineyard. And it wasn't until 2014 that we were able to raise funds for a feasibility and marketability study to determine if the island could support a greenhouse model. We soon started advocating with the hospital to replace the Windermere nursing home with a greenhouse model. And in 2017, we were lucky enough to meet Renee Lohman, an experienced leader of new forms of healthcare and recent founder and CEO of Navigator Elder Homes of the Cape and Islands. In 2018, we introduced Renee to Denise Zapizzi, who was at that time had just come to the island as the new CEO, and the rest is history. So today, I am very happy to introduce Renee Lohman, my friend and sister dreamer, to talk with you today about the greenhouse model and about our timeline in hoping to make it a reality. Renee?
Good morning, Patty, and everyone. Thank you. What a lovely introduction. I'm so happy to be with all of you. Thank you for the introduction, but also for the invitation by this congregation to include Patty and I in your thoughtful discussions about aging in these tough times. Before, I do have a set of slides that Andy can pull up now that are purely mostly visual, but I wanted to, before I begin any formal slide presentation, draw upon some thoughts that I've had about the connection between the Unitarian Universalist principles and mission and that of the Greenhouse Project, and what I've come to learn about not just the history of the Greenhouse Project, but the meaningful tenets of what happens inside the physical homes. There are shared beliefs of the Unitarian Universalist congregations, at least that I've read about, and the greenhouse movement. And they really are the belief in the worth and the dignity of every person. That's at the core. And in the greenhouses, residents come with their whole self, not part of themselves, not their dementia in many cases, not their physical disabilities, but their whole self. In the greenhouses, elders and their empowered helpmates come to appreciate compassion and human relations, another very core within the Unitarian movement. Respect for the interdependency of each community and home. And in the greenhouse movement, most of the communities have more than one home. And so the community itself embraces that interdependence of one home to another, which you'll learn maybe a little bit more about today and in the future. And then finally, I was thinking about the opportunities that we talk about now in the greenhouse movement, and we are calling it a movement, given what's happened in 2020, for fostering meaningful lives in real homes. And that's really what we try to get across, is that we are no longer looking at institutions, mini hospitals, brick buildings with long corridors, 3 people crammed in a room with curtains between them, 4 people sharing a bathroom. That will not occur in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts any longer, at least we can safely say, in the way we build new construction and a place called home for elders and others. So it's really a different way of linking aging to joy and wisdom and quality of life versus simply looking at it from the care of a Department of Public Health model, which is institutional, yes, meeting all the check boxes of nursing care, very important, not taking that away, but embracing all other aspects. And that's what I hope to get across today in the presentation, more so than necessarily the physical plant. So I thank you with those words, and again for the invitation to come in today. So the slides are going to take us through just a short review, mostly pictorial, of what we're thinking about, and I can make comments as we move through. So Andy, if you'd like to go to the first slide. Or do you want me to advance them, Andy?
Should be up.
Hmm?
I think it's up already.
I can advance them? Nope.
You want me to go ahead?
Yeah, that's fine. I'll just say next slide to you because I don't have the host control of this. There we go. Thanks. So we've talked about this name, the Greenhouse Project. And when Bill Thomas, who is a geriatrician, and he's the one that really came up with the concept and the name, when he thought about it, I think he clearly thought of things like sustainability and newness, but a lot of people have wondered what it really means, because these are not homes for plants. And while we're really talking about green homes, of course, with thoughts about renewable energy, in 2003, when he came up with this name, we weren't all talking about that so much, right? Environmental and solar and wind, and as we are now. But the good news is that the greenhouse model and the physical plant can accommodate all of that, renewable, which we're planning on. But I think the trademark really is more meaningful when you look at what's happening inside each home, as well as the modifications that have happened over time to make it better over the years. It's a nonprofit organization as well. So the Greenhouse Project has an office in the Baltimore area. They provide, prior to COVID, many on-site training programs for all of their adopters, of which we are one at Navigator on the Vineyard. And so as an adopter, you sign up with this group, and they're not a franchise of any sort. They're a nonprofit that provides consultation and everything that we need to properly follow the accreditation, if you will. So if you think of it as a standard of care versus the fact that it's an organization that has 300 homes that have chosen to adopt it, it really helps. And that's what we're achieving for, is the accreditation and the standard of care that we have found the Greenhouse Project to become for us. And as I've mentioned, the right that everyone has to age in dignity, with dignity. Greenhouse Project aims to destigmatize aging and humanize care, as that unfortunately has been the converse, as we've seen in the institutional model of care that's been around since 1970. So some may call this a radical change for non-institutional care, but in 2020, it brought, what happened was that the Greenhouse Project became known worldwide as a model, because fewer and fewer people got sick in greenhouses. There were only 9 cases in 300 greenhouses in 2020 of COVID, and only a couple people died. And it turns out that wasn't related to COVID, but they happened to die during that time period. So we know that this model works from all the check boxes, if you will, that look at how do you prevent infection spread. We know physically it works, but there's more to it than that. So we're excited now to be literally on a wave that is getting a lot of positive attention for being the model of the future. And here we are getting ready to launch these new homes on the Vineyard as one of our first major projects. So we want to empower the lives of the people, not just who live in the greenhouses, the residents, but empower those who take care of them. And in that, we look at the staff, and I love your naming them, and I think we're going to take this with us, empowered helpmates, because that's who they are. Usually the certified nursing assistants in other models of care end up having come to work and being told what to do in a hierarchy, a structure of hierarchy, where every job they do is something that they know is going to be repetitive every single day. And it's also the staff that are treated in that model as sometimes as, you know, the lowest end of the rung of the ladder. In the greenhouses, they are the leaders. They run the homes. They manage the homes. They work with each other. They schedule with each other. And yes, they report up to somebody, but in this model, when you train and work with people and pay them a little bit more, they really come into their own, and they form relationships and bonds with the elders that you won't see in other models. So we're excited about embracing this major departure from the environment that is very typical and has been throughout the country to something that will promote and retain our helpmates. Next slide, please. So this is a photo of the 2017 greenhouse home, one of 4 in East Greenwich, Rhode Island. East Greenwich is a lovely community that has been built and has a lot of senior housing, and as part of the St. Elizabeth's nonprofit community, they added 4 greenhouses to their existing campus, which includes assisted living, memory care, and some other housing. So it's a beautiful campus in East Greenwich, and they have been the kindest people to invite us from the Cape and southeastern Massachusetts to use their greenhouses as a show and tell location. And when some of the leaders of Martha's Vineyard Hospital and Paddy and others joined me for the tour of that site and those houses, it was Marie Zada, and she is the administrator at Windermere, that said, my mother would fit in here just fine. And we knew that we had a good match at that point, and that was in 2018. So we've talked about the 300 homes. That number's going up quickly. We have 32 states that have adopted some form of greenhouse model. In addition to the East Greenwich homes that I choose to show for you Martha's Vineyard folks, and it looks more like a home that it hasn't been. What I love is we've got some local people helping us with our construction, and they said, Renee, you've got to vineyardize the home. We haven't vineyardized our homes yet. And so when you see these pictures, not just of this, but of other renderings that I'm going to show you here today, know that these are not final. We have yet to take on some of the particulars of the look and the feel that we want to accomplish. But it really is, as I keep coming back to, more about what happens right on the inside. There is another community of greenhouses, if you're interested in looking at the website, in Chelsea. It is a high-rise. It is run by Chelsea Jewish, and there are about 6 floors of individual greenhouses on each level. And it fits as an urban model in Chelsea for the elders that live, each floor being a home. So they're small scale, they're self-contained. Every home, as you'll see, next slide, you can see the openness of some of what we're talking about on the inside. You've got open kitchen space where there's an encouragement of everyone to join in a meal together, including the helpmates. There's an open hearth and floor plan where people can share space. And yet everybody has, in the bottom right corner, you can see an example of a bathroom with a large bed, not a single bed, not a hospital rail, not hospital institutional buttons coming off the bed, but a real bed and a bathroom joining the suite. So everybody has, no matter who pays for this person, everybody has their own bed and their own bath. So there's the aspect of privacy. There's the aspect of not forcing elders who are going to live the rest of their lives in some cases in this type of setting into a hospital institutional look and feel. These beds can do everything that a hospital bed can do. They can go up and they can go down and they can be accessible, but they don't have to be a tiny single bed for an adult person. Just little touches like that. You can't see from these photographs too well, but there is lots of natural light. Natural light and the access to the outside is right up there with everything else that greenhouse really embraces. So people using outside space. Next slide, please. Oops, it's kind of out of order, but I'll just go with it. My fault. We did a market study, as Patty may have mentioned. There've been refresh of this study, and without looking at these tiny numbers, which we could send this to everybody if you'd like to see the presentation, but the numbers are for people 75 and older are just exponentially going to increase on the vineyard over the next 10 to 15 years. You're going to have an 84% increase. I think we all understand among the boomers, sip of water, that the numbers of people that are going to be requiring various options, whether it's aging at home with care in the home or whether it's coming to a greenhouse, there's going to be a need for all of these levels of care. And so the vineyard really requires, and what a gift to be able to say that Windermere, which now has 50 or so residents, will be replaced by a starting point of a 70-bed skilled nursing for those that really need this level of care, but it can do so within the context of a residential model, a real home. Next slide, please. So this is just an example of what we're envisioning. Again, I've been cautioned to say, Renee, it's not vineyardized. So I love that, because there's things that I'm learning every day about some things that we could do with, and I'm not the architect clearly, but this is our architectural rendering of our front, where we would have access to the outside, a porch with rocking chairs, plenty of light. The dormer is not to represent a second floor. It's just to bring in more light into the rooms. And because we're still under the guidance of the Department of Public Health, meaning we have to meet a lot of regulatory matters, this house may look big, and it is, because there's still requirements of the Department of Public Health for certain aspects of a nursing home that you would not find in a single family residence. Psych offices, and we're going to be providing physical therapy in these houses for people that are coming home from the hospital after a knee or hip replacement. So that's another function of the greenhouses, is to provide what we call short-term rehab, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with if you've ever had any hospitalization. So going to serve the island well for long-term residents, short-term residents, and in between. And this look will change a bit, but gives you the feel of it as a single story. 14 people will live in each home. Next slide, please. And here's the back. One thing we're very excited about is the design that we have in the property that the hospital has identified in Edgartown, is that there's plenty of open space. And rather than fill it all up, we're just taking a portion of this large piece of land that the hospital is also turning back, much of it to the town, for moth habitat and natural resources. But for our sliver of it, there will be what's called a pocket park. And the 5 homes will have the back of the home facing the pocket park. So no cars, no roads. The pocket park will then be used in an interactive way, at least during the outside months of the year, for all sorts of interactive artistic space, for music, for sculpture. And there's a lot of really cool ideas coming forth in our discussions with the architects and others who have been working on pocket park concepts. So as you can see, the outside will be active. There will be raised garden beds. There will be walking trails at a minimum. And the encouragement to be outside, it also extends into, as you're coming out of the house, you'll have the option of going in a screened-in porch or fully out to the air. So we'll have 2 options so that people can even enjoy the screened-in porch on not so great days. Next slide. So here's the attempt to discuss the connection between nature and well-being. what is so important to know about the Greenhouse Project itself is that they've been really steeped in evidence-based research for many years. The Robert Wood Johnson Foundation has funded lots of studies for greenhouse elders and residents. And what they've found is, on average, those that live in greenhouses live 5 years longer. Those that live in greenhouses continue what they loved to do before they came to the greenhouse. So if they were a gardener, they're encouraged to continue their gardening. If they were a teacher, then there'll be opportunities for education. So it's a very interesting culture, one that we just want to embrace fully, especially given the history of what happens on the vineyard. And what I know now is just steeped in cultural opportunities and learning from one another and just the big tent nature of the vineyard. Very exciting time to think about how we can involve other groups and organizations into what happens in that green space in Edgartown once we get going. Next slide. This is just, again, an artistic rendering of what you can see are the 5 14-bed homes, all facing this large park and one central road coming into the community. And then everybody will want to know what the 3 buildings represent on the outside. The hospital has agreed to provide workforce housing for 30 of our staff. So these will be apartments for the workforce. The other 30, there'll be 60 units there. It's envisioned there'll be 60 units in 3 buildings. The apartment survey went to the staff, and the staff said, no, I think a 1-bedroom would be fine, or a 2-bedroom will be needed for my family. So there'll be mostly 1 and 2 bedrooms, and there will be about 30 hospital staff that will live there as well. As you know, the hospital already has a lot of housing on the island because it's the only way that staff can stay retained. Doctors, nurses, in our case, will be housing our certified nursing assistants. So I'm very excited to say that some of our staff, if not all, will just walk to work. We're very pleased with that agreement. So this will help a lot in the retention, we hope, of our staff. Next slide. That's a more formal civil engineering representation, but you can see how far we've come. We've completed this schematic design work. We've got everything we need to go to the Martha's Vineyard Commission, which is our next step. Next slide, please. One thing that a lot of people ask me about the greenhouses is, well, what do you do for people who have dementia and Alzheimer's disease? Well, that whole aspect of the greenhouse has not just been contemplated, but they actually have a complete training model for caregivers, families, and staff, and the residents themselves. They have a national expert in dementia care, and her name is Ann Ellett. And Ann is employed along with another part-time person to do nothing but train and work with staff on dementia care. So if somebody is early in the stages of dementia, they are integrated right into the home. There is no locked corridor. There are no big locked hallways. There are no codes. This is a home. And so people who need dementia-friendly environments, their rooms may look a little different. As you can see here, architects and interior design people are studying this very carefully and putting lighting in that's motion-sensitive lighting. This is just happening at the speed of light in terms of the opportunity for interior changes that help people that need to have the best life that they possibly can as somebody living with this horrible disease of Alzheimer's disease. So it's constantly being upgraded and thought about and researched. And again, we thank Robert Wood Johnson for a lot of that, one of the largest healthcare foundations in the United States. Next slide, please. So we have a transition. Just thought a little slide, you can study it or just listen. 50-50 is the census, and that's just been because Windermere has wanted to keep with COVID down to a manageable number of residents. They have had to move some of their residents into single rooms in the hospital, reduce the staffing in the existing Windermere, as you know, it's very difficult for them to find on-island staff. So they have to constantly look for people who are traveling agency staff. So it makes it tough. In the greenhouse model, we have this concept called the universal worker. That's not the title of the person, but that's their job function. In other words, these wonderful people who will run the homes will do everything from laundry to cooking and to caring for the elders. So their job function is much more expanded in the greenhouse versus what it is in the current model for skilled nursing. So in ways we can make this more house friendly, they do things that normally they wouldn't do, like laundry and some light housekeeping. So Windermere, you know, we know that it's been a financially troubled model too, and a lot of reasons for that, but we have a great new model, and we're not going to talk about financials today at all, but it should be known that it's a very viable model, and we're standing by that based on everything we know. And part of it is because of our workforce for the housing, for the staff. Next slide. These are our schedules that Paddy helped refer to. So we have the wastewater preliminary approval. It won't happen. It didn't happen on the 18th, but there was a very positive meeting. And March 18th is the next meeting, and the consultant's report will be provided. And this is right in the town of Edgartown. So we think we have a capacity, not problem anymore, but we've reached the ability to get agreement on the capacity of the sewer. Our town meeting has been moved to May in Edgartown, and that was a disappointment, but it's okay. It's going to happen. We're on the warrant. We have a warrant to be on the town meeting to get the final zoning approval. And you can see the rest of it. The commission, there's a lot of steps along the way, right, to get approvals. The determination of need application is what goes to the Department of Public Health. It's actually now underway. And who's going to pay for all this? The good news is we have a wonderful agreement with the United States Department of Agriculture to put in the majority of the funding for the construction under what's called the Community Facilities Program. And Navigator has now, over almost a year now, had a nonprofit that we have organized, and we have a 501c3 that was organized a year ago for the purposes of raising other funds and accepting the funds from USDA as a not-for-profit. We hope to start construction no later than October, and it can't come soon enough. Next slide. We've done a lot of community outreach before COVID, and even last summer I was on the library Zoom meeting. So this just represents, again, a refresh for this year of having to continue to reach out to folks like you on this call today and others. And thank you. Next slide. Okay, so I guess I understand we will have question and answers after the service. Thank you so much for providing this time. I really hope it didn't come across as too much of a presentation where we're selling you anything. It's just, it really to me fits beautifully with the island culture and with the outreach of your congregation and those of others. So I thank you again. And Paddy, do you have any final words?
No, I think you've done a great job, and I look forward to the questions and answers.
I have a question, Paddy.
Great, Peter, go for it.
Okay, so actually there's several. I'll just throw them in there. How about dogs?
That would be a yes.
Or cats?
Yes.
I'm wondering, I assume that a husband and wife could come.
Yes.
I'm not sure how meals are handled, the cost and storage. The last thing that ties in that comes to mind is I'm in good health and I'm 86, and yet if something should happen, I assume it's going to happen like getting a heart attack or a stroke or something of this kind. I'm not prepared for anything else. And I'm just wondering if there's any way to get some sort of counseling about how one prepares for the inevitable but unknown.
Wow, excellent. All those points. So first of all, I should have talked a bit about pets, and every house can choose if they want a house pet. And this is a very common theme that we see at greenhouses, many house pets. So cats, dogs, and it really will be the group of people in that home, along with their helpmates, to make those.
Are you still there? Are
Can you
enjoying
hear,
it?
can you hear Renee?
I'm unmuted, I think.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, I hear
I'll
you.
keep you on then.
Okay.
We can hear you.
No, I'm not gonna hang up. They're into the breakout. They're all asking questions about this
No,
facility.
we're not going to have breakouts today. So we're going to stay in the common ground, if you will, and ask
Okay, I'll
questions
put you back
everyone
on.
can hear. So Peter Melanie has asked 5 questions, or 4, I guess. And
What'd you say?
Wait a minute. Maybe
Peter.
we should unmute if you're not going to
Oh,
be.
good.
Maybe we should mute if we're going to be on.
yes,
They want to sit up for lunch?
everyone should mute. Andy, can you mute us? And then if someone wants to ask a question, they can unmute.
Yeah.
Thanks. So Peter Melanie has asked several questions, and Renee is going to go for the first 4, and I'll try to do the 5th one about planning.
Okay, great. So I talked about the house pets being acceptable, and that each house typically will make that decision. If somebody comes with a dog, there'll be a discussion about will that dog fit in with the other residents and house pets. So it really is a communal decision, because people agree when they're coming to a greenhouse that they will be living in communal living, other than when they're by themselves in their own rooms. So the other question was about meals. So every greenhouse has their own kitchen. It's a very large, accessible kitchen. And so if a resident is able to do some cooking, he or she is invited to join the helpmates to be in the kitchen and prepare the meals in whatever capacity. It may be just baking cookies, it may be preparing lunch, but the actual staff helpmates will be doing the leading of the kitchen, and there's approved set of diets, of course, led by a dietitian, but there's not food service trays. It's a very home-like setting, so meals are shared typically by everybody. And anybody who was a cook or a foodie or an aficionado in their past will be encouraged to participate fully to the extent they can. And all the kitchens are wheelchair accessible. There's plenty of storage built into the kitchen complex. There's a pantry. There will be, of course, commercial size refrigerators and freezers, so that we meet, again, all these requirements that a skilled nursing home would have to have. So it's a very different model for enjoying food, but it's one that most everyone looks forward to. And in the middle of the night, if somebody wants a sandwich, they don't have to ask an aide. If they know where the food is kept, they could go get their own sandwich. So there's plenty of opportunity for that risk of dignity, that being the dignity of risk. I love some of the phrases that I'm learning from the Greenhouse Project. Take the risk and go get yourself a cookie. Paddy?
Renee, we have other questions from Karen Wilson about does the local community have to raise the millions needed? So I think it would help to have you talk a little bit about the process of funding it and what Medicare and Medicaid private pay means.
Yep.
And how you're open to donations.
Thank you. So thank you for that question. The bulk of the funds to build this community will come from the United States Department of Agriculture. Supplementing that are included some funds from the hospital, a donation of the land, and we will be paying $1 a year for a ground lease. So we have no ongoing rent of the land itself, which is truly a wonderful gift from Martha's Vineyard Hospital and MGH, Mass General, with their parent organization. We are raising the funds. There's no funding coming from local towns, from local county, the Dukes County. So we're raising our own funds as a not-for-profit organization. So that will be ongoing, especially this summer. So in addition to donations, we have an investment strategy. Even as a 501c3, we're allowed to provide an investment opportunity where individuals or couples or people can invest and then get a return on a loan, essentially. So it becomes a loan to our organization to complete the amount of money package that we need to get this thing completely built. Once the residents are moved from either Windermere or the new residents from the island come in, and these will be island residents largely. We know that. We're excited about that. There'll be an admissions process, and anyone meeting the skilled nursing qualification would be encouraged to come. So in other words, I think it was Peter that asked some questions and about levels of care. So if you're coming out of the hospital and you need to have some rehab for a period of time, you can come, but you wouldn't stay there you probably wouldn't want to stay in the greenhouse forever. But if you met the qualification after a stroke, you would. If you need something that you probably are familiar with the term of assisted living, that is really in this hierarchy of 24/7 nursing versus being at home. In between, there are other what we call levels of care in the continuum of care. And assisted living is one where you need some assistance, but not round the clock, right? And so what we're not doing yet is building assisted living. We'd like to consider that after we get this first major, community built, because it's of great need. So skilled nursing is the most, it's the most expensive, but that's why Medicare and Medicaid come in. Medicare is the federal program that pays for rehabilitation after a hospital stay. It also pays for outpatient physical therapy for anyone. Medicaid is the state program that pays for long-term care for all the people that can't afford any private pay. So for anybody that has private funds, they can pay for either assisted living or skilled nursing. If they don't have appropriate private funds, then we will be a Medicaid provider and we'll provide services in our nursing home greenhouses to those individuals. Windermere right now is about 50% Medicaid and 50% private pay. So with those numbers in mind, we have forecasted how the funds will come together on the operational side. So I hope that answered the question.
Renee, do you want to talk a little bit about our shared dream of a PACE program in the future? And everybody should know that this truly is still in the dream stage. It is not, there's no detailed planning going on, but if the state permits the expansion of Medicaid, of the PACE program, this would be a great collaboration.
I'd be happy to, Patty. So there are options to this notion that everybody has to, that is eligible for nursing care needs to be in a nursing home. And so there's, and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is one of the leaders in the options that it provides for people who have been admitted to nursing homes, live in nursing homes, but really could do well with the right supports in their own home or in their own apartment. So the PACE program, it's called the Program for All Assisted Care for Elders. And it was started over 30 years ago. It's a nationally funded program through Medicare and locally on the state level through a blending of funding with Medicaid dollars. And what it does is it allows people in nursing homes who really would be okay to live on the outside, meaning in their own home, with the right level of community support to do just that. And a PACE program then would be funded by, first of all, a program would have to be a certified PACE provider, and you go through a certification with the state, in this case, Massachusetts, and they would certify an organization to provide round-the-clock case, really it's what we call a wraparound model. So that person who leaves the nursing home has to be guaranteed that in the middle of the night, if they are in need, that somebody's going to be there for them, right? So it's a customized program where every individual is treated with their own care plan, but they are living independently with either a trained family member, a trained caregiver, or a group of caregivers that run on an 8-hour or whatever cycle of care that they come in and out. So it is an option. It is a cost savings to the state. Believe it or not, it's less expensive than paying for nursing home care round the clock to offer home care. So it is a home care option. The PACE providers right now are in the Commonwealth. There are 8 of them, and they really mostly work in Boston. So the Boston-centric nature of the PACE program has not even reached Barnstable County, where I live, which is the oldest county in the state. And so you can imagine the Cape Codders have been pushing for really trying to get the expansion to be approved for Barnstable, Dukes, and Nantucket counties, because it would make a lot of sense and a lot of savings could be derived from people who are in nursing homes who want to leave and try to and really work to live on their own with the right supports. So Patty and I have studied these numbers on the island, and we believe it would be a really wonderful adjunct to greenhouses. And somebody could live, you could actually have a greenhouse community home with PACE eligible people living in the greenhouse. And the greenhouse would just be staffed accordingly to a PACE program. So the greenhouse is extremely adaptable. It's not just used for skilled nursing. It's used for a variety of options for people to live.
I love it. Here's another question. There are 2 more questions at least in the chat. One is, would you talk to where the land is and where the greenhouses will be built? Off the Edgartown Road, but.
Yep, the address happens to be 490 Edgartown Vineyard Haven Road. It is near Pennywise Path, and really it fronts, I guess Morgan Woods would be considered the nearest neighbor of size in terms of, if you're familiar with the Morgan Woods development that went in several years ago. So Teaberry Lane is another neighboring street, if you know that neighborhood. So it's on your way into town. The land is privately owned by the Norton family. That's public information, so I can say that. And the agreement with the hospital is that they're acquiring over 22 acres of land, of which we're only using 9. So the 9 acres will accommodate the greenhouses and the workforce housing. And much of the other part of the land will be, as I mentioned earlier, donated back to the town so that the town can restrict its use for natural habitat, and it won't be disturbed. We have you can imagine with our zoning coming up, we have met all the requirements of the town. They're very supportive. We hope the commission will be as well. This is needed as a community benefit on the island. And the hospital has, quite frankly, done everything that they said they would with regard to contributing to remaining property for open space, which I know is extremely important to many on the island.
We have another wonderful question about end-of-life care. I'm sorry, about an electric piano. Would the greenhouse permit someone to bring their electric piano with them?
Absolutely. Absolutely. People bring, in Rhode Island, I was introduced to amazing stories, and Sally, who's on this call, has a really cool story about Rhode Island. She's still on, but that's an aside. People bring their furnishings. They can bring, we will furnish the room for people that want a furnished room, and the right bed and all of that. But if they want to bring their desk, their musical instrument, their bureau, it's encouraged, and even furniture for the common areas. So this is home, right? This is not, we don't want this to look like the same across, each house will be different, and we want that. So thank you, great question.
And can you speak to any kind of estimated cost per day for private pay people?
Yes, it's going to be in the high 400s, so probably somewhere around 480 a day for the private pay. That's the going rate for this kind of care. That's why it's so,
Or
nursing
parallel to nursing homes around the state?
parallel to the, yeah, but exactly, Boston and the Cape.
So, someone asks, end of life care, will this greenhouse work with hospice and other agencies to assure end of life care planning?
Absolutely. We'll have beds reserved for hospice care like most nursing homes are supposed to. We will immediately work with, you have 2 hospice services already on the Cape, or excuse me, on the Vineyard, and we would be immediately tying to them from day one. I know one of them is your local hospice group, the Hospice of the Vineyard, I think it's called, of Martha's Vineyard.
Right.
Yeah, they're seeking their Medicare number now. They're going to get Medicare approved, which is fantastic, which will allow them to interface more in line with what's needed to get them paid for the services they provide. And we will have beds for hospice. Right now in Windermere, there's 6 people on hospice. So we know that that's an important important linkage.
And the wonderful thing about hospice's new adventure with Medicare is that they will continue to provide care just as they have as
Exactly.
someone cannot and doesn't have Medicare, or as a supplement to that. So that's really terrific. Will Greenhouse be organized independently from the hospital, or will it be legally a part of the hospital?
No, we are a separate nonprofit organization. It's called Navigator Homes of Martha's Vineyard. It's now a year old, and it's a 501c3, as I mentioned before. It is not a part of Partners Health or of Martha's Vineyard Hospital. That was a decision we both made, and it's fine. We can have agreements that allow for the give and take between us, but it makes sense for a lot of purposes, tax-wise and everything else. So,
right. Will you campaign for the Greenhouse be coordinated with people's independent insurance if they have long-term care insurance? For
sure. Mm-hmm.
So that would come under your private pay.
Anybody that has insurance of any sort that would contribute to this, we would work with that entity for a negotiated rate and work with them to be the payer for the elder, for the resident.
You had mentioned that the greenhouse would have the capacity to provide physical therapy, and there's some concern from someone that might prove as competition to independent physical therapists who have their own practice here. You want to comment on that?
We will be contracting with local PT. We will not have our own staff. So we would like to contract with the local physical therapy group to work with us. And the physical therapy that occurs in a nursing home is, quite frankly, very different than an outpatient physical therapy site where people would go for sports injuries or other types of outpatient services. We do not plan to offer or compete with a physical therapist on the island who would have their own storefront or even go into people's homes.
Right.
So ours is strictly would be a physician requiring the person who's coming in to have physical therapy so they can walk around their home, so they can get stronger as basic rehabilitation or ongoing strength exercise training in the house.
And someone wants to know wonderfully, will there be a role for volunteers?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. again, I love the Greenhouse Project because they've thought of everything. And so as we get deeper, and one of the members of our team who is leading, she's our lead educator, and I don't know if she's still on, but her name is Maureen Corrigan. And Maureen is a licensed independent clinical social worker who is leading our education team within the Greenhouse Project model. So she will be leading those efforts as well, so that once we get the Helpmates trained, and then we can reach into community and recruit anyone who would like to come and be a part of this this community. Thank you for that question.
There are a lot of wonderful people on this island who have very vigorous volunteer lives. So I think it'll be a great
Awesome.
help to the greenhouse and to the island as well.
Sounds like we may need a dog walker.
Possibly. Do I hear a volunteer? I don't see any other questions in the chat.
Oh, I had a question.
Okay, before we close up.
Yep.
What is your best estimate on when your house will be ready for people?
Oh, boy, that's a big opportunity. Thank you for asking, Nancy. The 5 homes will be built at the same time, and we hope a year from October. So October 2022 is our.
Okay. Well, I spent some time in a nursing home after I had one of my replacements. And it was the most horrible experience I've ever had in my life. And I've always said I would never go to a nursing home, but this sounds a lot different than what I was subjected to.
Real home.
Okay.
Real home. Think
And
of those words.
The words "home for life" are not just thrown away. I mean, I think
That's
it's
right.
part of the greenhouse model that really means it.
May
No,
I
it
ask
gives-
a question? May I ask a question or two?
Of course.
My first thought is it sounds divine, absolutely wonderful. My concern is the person who is going to be the housemate but empowered. If she has 5 people at least in each home and she's in charge of one home, she has to arrange for the meals. Does she also do the food purchasing? Who would determines the actual, not meal preparation? Is it just her with our help? I mean, the people who are staying there.
Great.
I just think it's sort of overwhelming because she's supposed to do light housekeeping,
No.
also look after people who might have a degree of dementia. There
There's
seems to be a lot that she's expected to do.
There are 3 people per home at all
Oh,
times.
okay, thank you. That answers
Three
my
are-
question.
They're all cross-trained. So those 3 individuals will work together. It's a
Right,
team
and I
effort.
liked your idea of being able to get up in the middle of the night and go get something out of the fridge. But is that fair to the other people? You might take more than you're supposed to. And
Plenty of-
if you suffer from dementia, and I'm raising this because I had my mother with dementia for like 30 years, from her 60s to her high 80s. And you know, with sundowning and what have you, how can we count on dementia patients being able to cope with people who are still with compos mentis, put it that way?
It's really going to be about the ratio of how we staff homes that have people with more advanced dementia, and they'll never be alone. I mean, even in the middle of the night, I use that as an anecdote because it gives people a sense of real home versus an institutional model where when you're done eating at 5 o'clock, that's it. You know, you can't have a snack. So it's really a more, there will be plenty of support in terms of staff so that we don't have someone with dementia in trouble because they're confused.
And I just wanted to clarify, for people who are able to pay the max, is it $480 daily? Is that what you said?
That's about the range, right? We're thinking about.
Thank you, but long-term care insurance would help.
Oh, certainly. Great
It
question.
certainly would. Yeah. I think that we will have, here's a question from Esther. What attempts are you going to make to deal with people whose incomes fall between their Medicaid and 178,000 a year? I'm not sure where the 178 came from, but
Well, you know, what we'll like to do is, this is where, you know, quite frankly, we'll have some really good financial backing through some endowments that we hope to achieve with our nonprofit status. So we've already had some people step up and say they'd like to help us build upon a reserve that would help fill some gaps until we get into a cycle. A lot of people that are in that, what that might be called the gap between the fact that they can't pay the full private pay and they're not Medicaid eligible, we're going to work with them. We're not going to certainly be any house or home or community that would ask someone not to stay with us after they've been admitted. So once we go through the admission process, they can be there for life, and we'll figure that out. And that will be in our policy manual.
Obviously still to be determined or to develop as time goes on.
Yeah.
I noticed that it's 12:34, and I'm sure that Renee and I would be happy to stay, but our numbers are also dwindling. So are there other questions? Don't want to cut this off. While you're thinking about how to answer that, I would also say two things. It is important. The Edgartown Planning Board has been very helpful, and it is voting next month, finally on the necessary approval of a zoning bylaw to change. Currently, Edgartown allows for assisted living facilities, but it does not have a specific allowance for nursing homes. So at town meeting in Edgartown in May, that will be on the warrant. So those of you who live in Edgartown can keep that in mind. And then Renee mentioned hearings before the Martha's Vineyard Commission at dates still to be determined. They can't start till 30 days after the town meeting approval.
Yeah, exactly.
But that is a time when we would welcome support for the idea of the nursing home. And there'll be more in the paper about that, of course.
Thank you, Patty.
Further questions? Well, thank you so much for inviting us.
Thank you.
Thank you for dreaming with us. And,
Yes.
Tad Crawford had a question.
I didn't see Tad. How wouldn't Tad?
Tad,
Thank you.
gotta unmute.
I have a question too. I
Okay.
have a question too.
All right. Is Tad still on? Let's go with that. And then Jennifer.
Tad, you're still muted.
That was a great presentation.
Great.
Just to fill in space there.
Cheers, Tad.
Tad, your question?
I want to begin by thanking you, Renee and Patty, for incorporating and relating the values we have as UUs with the values you have with greenhouses. Very impressive.
Thank you.
And I'm particularly impressed by the PACE program, which would fit very well the kinds of plans we have for the future. And do you have any idea, order of magnitude, what the cost might be for it?
Oh, well, the PACE program, it doesn't cost the individual anything. It's all completely paid for by the federal government and the state government. And that's the beauty of it, is that there are no out-of-pocket costs for the individual or the couple.
Oh, pretty boy. Yeah.
That's impressive.
Mhm.
Yeah, we need to expand that, and that's my goal as a policy person, and an advocate, is to continue at the state level, having PACE expand to where it's needed most, which is in counties like the ones I mentioned, where it's great that they have it all around Boston, but they're missing, the state's missing opportunity to really reduce the nursing home bed size by not having PACE here. And so
Wonderful.
Particularly when the population is growing so fast and so
that's
big.
right. Yeah.
Thanks for raising the question, Tad. And Jennifer?
Yeah, I I too really want to tell you what a lovely it was not only a wonderful presentation, very well thought out and easy to follow, but it was a lovely service that you both conducted, and we really appreciate it. I just would like to request that you get information to Rita or our administrator so that it can be put in our weekly emails for a while, a way to get in touch with you or your organization for future questions or for volunteering, even at this point.
Sure.
So, and would it just be you, Renee, or would it be Renee and you, Patty?
Patty and Maureen.
There are two different things. I'm fortunate to be on the board of Navigator Homes, but the planning, the development of this and other services, Healthy Aging will be working closely with Navigator Homes. So we'll put both of our information in and we'll sort it out later.
And who is Renee connected with, Navigator or Healthy
He is
Aging?
the CEO of Navigator Homes.
Navigator. Great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for your comments.
Thank you for coming.